Who is the most dangerous person you had ever met? Probably my ex-best friend. I learned his dad was high up in an Aryan gang and a drug trafficker, and that's why he was being housed by a foster family along with his little sister. He wasn't about their beliefs at all and did not communicate with his dad. He opened up about how he struggled with a previous meth addiction. However, he was sober when I met him, and all throughout our time as friends. He was a good dude. When I was hanging out with him at least. Very street smart, honest, great listener, cared for others very deeply, would give you the shirt off his back type of guy. He saved our asses from getting jumped in an alley one night by being hyper aware of the dudes taking an interest in us, while I was oblivious, grew up super sheltered. I thought he wanted better for himself out of this life, and it seemed like it at first. I met my now ex-wife and I started see how he was around her, and I did not like him being near her, crude comments, touching her, weird sexist remarks, etc. Just gross. Not like how I knew him at all. So I cut him off. He was pissed, but I didn't like what I was seeing, who he was becoming, and I loved her more. Cut to about 5 years later, I learned he murdered a homeless guy in SF a year after I cut him off. Him and his buddies did it. What's wild is he reached out to me after he did that, but before he was caught, asking for a place to stay, but I said no. I just had a feeling he was bad news at that point, and I was right. My dad. My sister was assaulted by a boyfriend when I was 19 and she was 17. I knew the guy pretty well and counted him a friend, and my sister and I are really close. I was livid and convinced I'd murder him. Fast forward to an argument between me and my mother about it. She refused to let me leave the house, and my dad, who's super gentle and a silent minds guy, just sits there. I've started getting into him for being a coward and not doing anything. I said some pretty horrific shit, and next thing I know, I'm on my back looking at the ceiling. Only time my dad ever hit me. So I've got a bag of peas on my chin, mom looking after me, and dad is gone. He was out for 12 hours and came home late at night. Never said a word about where he'd been. I get a call the following afternoon. The ex-boyfriend got jumped behind the bar he worked at. Apparently, for dudes with metal bars beat him into a coma so bad he spent for months in hospital to recover. When he walked out of the hospital, he was paid a visit by a random human. Went home, packed his shit, and flew overseas that night. Never seen or heard of him since. Dad worked in construction and knew a fair few maniacs. Don't had any of the story from him directly. He just says, "I'll tell you when you're older." I'm now 45. Motherfucker just smiles and says, "I'll tell you when you're older." I did the summer work in Alaska thing, and we were drinking in a bar and met this local dude who took us out in his boat and then went nuts and started telling us all to get off his boat or he'd kill us in the middle of the sound. And he started throwing his own shit off the boat, and then he started crying and went back to the dock, and when we told the local cops, they says, "Yeah, you need to avoid Clayton. Dude is in and out of appy for violent shit all the time." We were lucky no one got hurt. I had a guy in my scout platoon in Afghanistan that was the calmest killer ever saw in 10 years in. He was the coldest, calmest guy under fire I've ever seen. Never batted an eye, even under heavy fire and ambushes. I never heard him raise his voice, which is very rare for an co-leading Joes. We were on patrol one day, hear the typical snap bang of a sniper taking a shot at us. He whirls with his M4 and fires, dropping a guy off a rooftop with a single shot. Just as calm as anything, he comes over the net to me. B2, this is B4. One enemy kier like he was ordering at a drive-through. I saw him do that, and many other things that would send most people barking mad up a tree. But he was just as cold and calm like he was at a picnic. I'm convinced that man was born to do the job he was in. I have an extended Italian family that started a construction business, and they always said they had no ties whatsoever to the mafia. When my mother was a teenager, they went to Florida for vacation in the 60s. Some guy that was staying at the hotel tried to rape my mother. My mother managed to escape and let everyone know, and that was the end of the story. When my grandfather died, at the funeral, my mother's uncle approached my mother and I and said to my mother, "Do you still remember that trip to Florida? What that man did to you? Your father had that was legs broken. Just wanted to tell you that." We were shocked, but it made us question the connection since they were visiting from Canada. And a phone call was made and people showed up to the hotel to break his legs. There must have been connections. A boy of 14. I was 13. He invited me to a party. His brother's birthday. Turned out it was not a McDonald kind of party, more of a wild bash. He was giving me juice laced with vodka. Very small amounts, but I got drunk and dizzy without noticing. He was getting handsy outside, and then took me inside. He got me to a small room out of the party and pushed me on the bed. I was struggling and pushing back. My friend from school noticed outside that something was not okay, so he came searching. My mum came shortly after. It was 9 p.m. and, after my curfew and first and the last time I missed it, I was unharmed. Nothing bad happened. It was 30 years ago. He was the most dangerous person I have met, to me, because I was unprepared. From that moment, I worked in a challenging and violent behaviors unit when I worked in a care home. One of our clients was once called by the Daily Record the most dangerous man in Scotland. He didn't seem dangerous to me. Then I read his care file, and I started reminding everyone he was supposed to have 2-person supervision at all times, and we'd all got super slack about that, and I got told I was being silly, that was all years ago. I refused to work with him without a partner present. Some of the other care workers backed me, some didn't. Then there was an incident, and let's just say that nobody was making fun of me after that, and everyone wanted a partner with them when working with him. I've had to run-ins with the guy. First time my friend offended him by calling him sir. He didn't like that for whatever reason. This was probably late 90s. I was a teenager and thought he was gonna beat the fuck out of my friend for calling him sir. He just had this entirely offended look in his eyes. Next time, I was his server at a restaurant. He was polite but to the point when ordering. It was him and one of his kids. He just sat over his meal like an animal protecting his food. I don't remember almost anything about the experience except that they barely spoke, and also just being worried something would be wrong with the meal, and he would just beat the fuck out of me, and the last thing I'd see is that face tattoo. I was definitely overthinking the whole thing, but he was just such a presence, even when he was just sitting and eating. Paratrooper from World War E. The man was in demolition and obstacle clearing. He was trained in high explosive creations and applications. He could build a bomb with contents of an average kitchen that could level a house, and had done so. Chemical engineer pre-Wii. He had survived D-Day on a glider as part of the Pathfinder's units. He survived the Battle of the Bulge. He once said, "I know for sure that I put 43 men in their grave, but it's likely more, so I owe that to any god up there." He could never watch Saving Private Ryan all the way through. The knife duel to the death at the end of the movie was too real, as he had been in that kind of situation more than once and came out the survivor. He was in his 80s when I met him, and he was still terrifying force to reckon with. My father, thankfully he died 10 years ago. He was a convicted murderer, rapist, among his many convictions. My mom was 17 when he groomed her. He was 36. It was before the internet. She didn't find out what a terrifying person he was until she was 18. Married to him and pregnant with me. He stalked us for years. He held us hostage for 3 days when I was 6 because he was mad my mom tried to escape. We'd fled the state. He found us. During that 3 days he almost killed my mom. It's honestly a miracle she survived the viciousness of his attack. Her ear was almost torn off and she could no longer have children after what he did. I witnessed it. We ended up changing our names and moving roughly at 20 for our drive away, with nothing but the clothes on our backs after she healed from that attack. She chose a 3 strikes rate since he had enough violent felonies, he wouldn't risk coming there. I almost chose not to have children because so many of my half-siblings are like him. Violent criminals. I was scared I'd be cursing a child to be evil. I waited until my late 30s to have kids as a result. My mom grew up down the road from Ted Bundy. She met him a few times as a kid. She said he was unsettling but she couldn't explain why back then. I traveled to New Zealand in 2012. Out drinking I meet this guy who didn't give a fuck, taking drinks off the table that people ordered. Being 21 and drunk it was hilarious to me. Looking back he was very sociopathic with others at the bar. There was a news piece about cars being blown up. Just something you see and go damn that sucks. Cut to 1 a.m. at a different spot. Run into that guy again. He had been talking my ear off at the previous spot so I was pretty done talking to him. He's spouting off random nonsense and realize he's kind of crazy so I just start agreeing with him. All of a sudden he goes, "I like you. Do you want to come with me to Kabumakar?" I'm like, "What?" "You know." Makes the sound a 6-year-old would make of an explosion with the hand gestures and everything. I was drunk and almost agreed to it. had a sober moment of realizing I'm in a foreign country. Leave. Next morning, his picture with a "Have you seen this man?" as a caption on TV. Not me. And I wouldn't call it meeting. But my mom was sitting across from one of the 911 terrorists in Florida on a train, some sort of public transportation. The terrorists were routinely training at the airport. She said some girls were trying to talk with him and flirt with him, and he just looked straight ahead, stone cold, like a dead man. I pulled up a picture of the terrorists and asked her to point him out, and she pointed him out so fast it was disturbing. I looked it up, and her story holds true. My sister was starting college right around the time he was reportedly down there. It was Marwan al-Shehi on Flight 175. This is a regular customer at work. He speaks to what I assume is his spouse like she's a child. Put that back. It's $4 more. We can't get that. You get the cheap stuff and that's it. Go on. Get something. Are you getting something? Do it now. Hurry up. Meanwhile, she looks constantly scared. At one point, he tried to get my attention and I didn't hear him, so he had to repeat himself, and he did not like that. He grabbed my work equipment cart from me, shaking it, trying to push it into me, yelling, "If you don't want to work, then don't work." I'm 99% sure he beats her for fun at home. He had zero problem trying to hurt me in public for not hearing him once. I was in Bosnia on a charity trip from uni, and basically, long story short, my friends and I made friends with the town's main mafia guy. All the local police flashed their lights at. As a mark of respect, he drove us all up a mountain once, and my both genuinely thought he was going to kill us. But he just wanted us to see the views. He did a birthday party for my friend and I, and got some of his minions to bring us cake. He had a baseball bat in his car, and once I teasingly asked if he enjoyed playing, and he snickered. Yeah. Bosnian baseball. He was clearly a very dangerous character, but lovely to us. I blame my ad for this and many other ill-thought-out friendships decisions I made in my 20s and beyond. My dad was a big drinker, so I spent a lot of time in pubs or waiting around while he got drunk. In typical Barfly fashion, he'd often strike up a convo with his fellow alcoholics. When I was maybe 11, the family drove across the Nullarbor, a vast area of empty land stretching across the guts of Australia. We stopped in some podunk town in the middle of nowhere. Dad got talking to Mick. This is sounding a little Wolf Creaky, but it's legit. Anyway, Mick oozed volatility. Even at my young age, I had all sorts of alarm bells ringing in my brain, though I was unable to articulate them at the time. He just had this violent, powder keg energy about him. Anyway, I sat on a bar stool, doing my best to follow along with the increasingly impaired back and forth. Eventually, Mick revealed that it was his first drink since getting out of prison. I'll never forget this part of the otherwise hazy conversation. Dad. Prison? Not our happy-go-lucky Mick. Mick? Yeah. Happy-go-lucky until he comes home from work to find his wife with another man. He then went on to explain in great detail how he beat the guy to death with his bare hands. At this point, the alarms were ringing in my ears. I had this cold feeling. Felt like the emotional equivalent of a cat that doesn't want to be picked up, just mentally searching to find a way out of the conversation, but I was powerless. Within the same hour, some cops walked in. His demeanor shifted really suddenly. The volatility grew serious legs. He immediately took to antagonizing them. I remember that being the moment where I made the connection that he must have hated cops because of his previous interactions with them, obvious as an adult, but really jarring to witness as a kid. He really went after them verbally, calling them pigs and an onslaught of other nasty things within seriously seconds of them walking in. They were incredibly patient with him, but it was like he wanted to go back to prison, sidestepping their courtesies and finding new ways to be antagonistic towards them. Dad didn't deem it time to leave until Mick threw the first punch at the cops. He wicked one of them real good. He was wrestled to the ground and arrested in this huge scene. Sucked all of the energy out of the bar. He was still screaming abuse when they cuffed him, struggling to get free and telling them he was going to kill them. I've never felt so unsafe around a human being in my life, and that feeling found new heights with every minute that passed. You know, a couple years ago I mentioned on Reddit how I spent so many nights sitting in a car in the car park, waiting for hours for my dad to return from the bar to drunkenly drive us both home. It was only the sympathetic replies of Redditors that made me see it as that big a deal. It just felt normal to me. Writing this reply, I'm realizing just how many ways my dad's drinking put me in harm's way, made me feel unsafe, and exposed me to things kids really shouldn't have to hear. See, at no point had I ever seen this as my dad being a shit one. But I fucking see it now. Sorry for the novel.